is Troy, your host. We are live and recording.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, July 11th, 2023, and we're going to move forward with our land use meeting and public hearing. I'll call the meeting to order, and if you'll all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Attorney Garcia, do we have certification of the agenda today?
We do. The County Attorney's Office has reviewed all items on the agenda. All items have been properly notified, and the Commission has jurisdiction over all those items.
Okay, thank you. And do any commissioners have disclosures for items on this agenda today?
I have none, thank you.
No, sir.
And I have none either. With that, I wanted to actually, if I could oblige the board to move up item 3C, which was to be continued to July 25th, 2023 at 2:30 p.m. That's the River Canyon Plan Development 9th Amendment Project File ZR 2022-033. I know Heather Scott, our principal planner, is prepared to present on that. I wanted to clarify with council, I know we do have some neighbors that are here to speak to that issue, and I just wanted to acknowledge you and appreciate you coming today to share with us. So for council, is it appropriate for citizens to be able to comment on a continued item?
No, so this isn't if it is continued to a later date, that would be the time to make comment as to that item. The continuance itself is at the discretion of the petitioner and the board.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm disappointed because I know it's tough to get to meetings in the middle of the day. You all have work and other commitments and things going on with families. And my sense is that you're probably prepared to share some things with us today, and I want to hear them. I know all three of us do. But as you've heard from council, we cannot accept comment today because the item is being continued. But what I would ask is that when that item does come back, that you would personally invite you to please come back and share any thoughts and comments that you have with us. So with that, let me turn it over to Heather Scott for any comments on the continuance.
Has requested to be continued until July 25th to have a time to address neighbor concerns.
Okay. Any additional information as to why this is being continued today?
After the Planning Commission hearing, the Planning Commission recommended denial 5-2, and the applicant would like to go and actually address their three concerns that the Planning Commission brought up.
Okay. And then was the neighborhood and affected stakeholders properly notified of the continuance today?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So with that, let me ask if the board has any additional questions or comments on this item.
I have none.
No question.
Okay, and with that, I will accept a motion from the board.
If it pleases the board, I do have a motion to continue River Canyon Plan Development. It would probably be really good for me to turn that on. If it pleases the board, I do have a motion to continue River Canyon Plan Development 9th Amendment. Project file is ZR 2022-033 to July 25th, 2023 at 2:30 p.m.
Second.
So there's a first and second on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries. So again, that will be continued to July 25th, 2023 at 2:30 p.m., at which time we will take citizen comment. With that, we'll move back up to item 2A, which is our land use meeting agenda items. It is a transfer of J.A. Ranch conservation easement to Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust. Dan Dirtz, Director of Open Space and Natural Resources, presenting for staff. Dan?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dan Dirtz for Open Space and Natural Resources. I'm here before you today to present a transfer of conservation easement on J.A. Ranch from Douglas County and the Conservation Fund to Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust. J Ranch is located on the east side of I-25, generally between Larkspur and Bell Mountain Ranch subdivision. The J Ranch has a conservation easement on 6,261 acres. The conservation easement was established by the Conservation Fund and Douglas County in 1999. It was always intended that the conservation easement be transferred to a land trust that was best suited for the property. Since ranching is the main use of the property, Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust is a great fit. Little background on what Colorado Cattlemen's Association Land Trust is a land trust that was established from a cattlemen's association. It was the first land trust that was formed by a state livestock association in the country. Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust partners with landowners across Colorado to protect agricultural land and conserve its natural resources. The benefits of this transfer is that there is no cost to the county. It does eliminate some of the work that we have had to do in the past, which is monitoring those properties. One of the best things about this is all of the benefits that Douglas County has will still remain true with this transfer and upheld through the transfer. Those events such as the J Ranch dinner that Douglas Land Conservancy will be hosting on, was it July 24th, I believe?
Tickets go on sale July 24th.
That's where the tickets go on sale, on July 24th.
It's in August.
Thank you, Commissioner. The recommendation from staff is that we do recommend that the county transfer this conservation easement to Colorado Cattlemen's Association Land Trust. And this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions for Dan?
I don't have any questions. I would just like to, I have met Nina Ritchie, who owns the J.A. Ranch, many, many times. And I just think it's appropriate that when we have the opportunity to talk about these historic figures in our county, that we give that opportunity. Nina, the ranch is called the J.A. Ranch because her great-grandfather was named Jack Adair, and he bought and put together the first J.A. Ranch in the panhandle of Texas, along with the help of a gentleman named Charles Goodnight, who was very big in Pueblo. In fact, there's a street in Pueblo named Goodnight. And after the ranch in Texas was started, they came up here and bought this ranch. And so Nina spends her time in Texas, except when it gets too hot. And then she comes up here to Colorado. So she's usually here for that dinner at the J.A. Ranch. And she now has a son and a grandson, so that's 6 generations that she knows of that will be part of this ranch. I just think that when we have great landowners and stewards who are willing to put their ranch into a conservation easement. I think she might have gotten $5 million for being able to put this into a conservation easement. But just think about what, if that had been developed, those 6,000 acres, it would have been prime property. People would have loved to have bought that and developed it. But she selflessly put it into the conservation. And so I hope that Nina is back next month to see her. Just great stories, just a wonderful woman. So thank you for letting me tell the story about Nina Ritchie.
That's great. Thank you for that history background, Commissioner Thomas. That was interesting. Additional comment from the board?
No questions.
Okay. For the listening public and maybe those online, when we talk about conservation easements and our priorities around preserving protected land, tell us why we might, want to transfer this to cattlemen's. Why not leave it exactly as it is?
Well, Commissioner, as of right now, the Conservation Fund, who is an organization that helps acquire open space properties or preserve these through conservation easements, is an agency that really goes out and tries to acquire those kind of things. That's not what they tend to do, is they tend not to hold on to these conservation easements and monitor those. Same for the county. For us to monitor this conservation easement, it does take staff time and effort to get out there. We are not well suited to monitor this land as well as cattlemen's would be. Cattlemen's, what they do is part of that is they understand the beef industry, they understand ranching, they understand all those things that the JA Ranch has to offer, and they are very well suited to monitor this easement, understand the impact of the cattle on the land, those type of things that our staff is just not as well suited for. So really that's the reason why this would be best suited for cattlemen's.
Well, thank you for that. So if there's any additional changes, modifications, request for differentiating how that land is used, would the county no longer have any authority around that?
No, the county will stay. The county will stay involved with cattlemen's. If they were to make any major adjustments and whatnot, they would come back and talk with the county about that.
Is that a legal requirement or a courtesy?
More of a courtesy.
Okay, so are we abdicating some of our authority to oversee this conservation easement in the original agreement?
No, we are not. We are not. The land trust is required to still fulfill all the requirements that were originally agreed upon. So
Okay.
there wouldn't be a major change to that agreement without our involvement as the county. We were also a funding source for that conservation easement.
Sure we were. Anything else from council on that in terms of conservation easements?
No, I think that's well stated.
Okay, great. So with that, let me open it up for any citizen comment on this item. Is there any citizen comment with regard to this item 2A? Troy, do we have any citizen comment online?
Yes, sir. I do have John, I don't know if it's Goya. He is the director of the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute him now, sir.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Go ahead, John.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I apologize. I have my toddler in the background who is asking me to, I don't know what he's asking me to do. But anyway, I am the director of transactions at the Cattlemen's Land Trust. Eric Glenn is our executive director. I apologize because I wanted to join in person today, but had my sick son home. But I just wanted to chime in here and just say on behalf of the Cattlemen's Land Trust, thank you to Douglas County for supporting the conservation of this project originally and for being the steward of the easement for over 20 years now. And the Land Trust is honored to take over the easement and work with you on this transfer. I'm sorry, I'm going to mute myself now.
Well, listen, we never mind hearing kids in the background, and family comes first, so thank you for what you're doing there, Dad. Any questions or comments for the Cattlemen's Land Trust, since we do have a representative here?
I have none.
No, sir.
Okay, and I have none either. Thank you, sir, for being here with us. Any additional citizen comment?
I have no additional online comment.
Okay, and with that, I'll close citizen comment, bring it back to the board for any further discussion and or a motion.
I have a motion to approve the transfer of JA Ranch Conservation Easement to Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust.
Yeah, seems like a no-brainer. Second.
So there's a first and second on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that motion carries 3-0. With that, we'll move on to items 3A and 3B, which will be heard together. It's a second and final reading of an ordinance regulating short-term rentals, project file DR 2023-001, as well as item 3B, which is a resolution setting fees related to licensing of short-term rentals. Michael Carey, Manager of Zoning Compliance, presenting for staff. Hi, Michael. And we have Steve Koster as well. Hi, Steve.
Is my mic on? Yep. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Michael Carey, representing Community Development. The request before you this afternoon is an ordinance to regulate short-term rentals. The project number is DR 2023-001. The request is for the board to adopt upon the second and final reading of an ordinance regulating short-term rentals. The purpose of the ordinance is to regulate the short-term rental of residences in unincorporated Douglas County. Short-term rental is defined as a lease for a term of less than 30 consecutive days. The ordinance specifies that a short-term rental is allowed within all zone districts, but only in a planned development if the PD specifically allows the use once a license has been issued. The ordinance would be administered by Community Development. Community Development would review each short-term rental license application to determine if the criteria of the ordinance have been met. The ordinance grants the director the authority to approve or deny a short-term rental license and to suspend or revoke a short-term rental license if the ordinance is being violated. A licensee could appeal, a decision of the director at a public hearing before the board. The ordinance is set up to be enforced by both community development staff or the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. The ordinance allows for a warning and a request for voluntary compliance prior to more severe enforcement action to be taken. A warning may not be provided in certain instances, such as if a violation poses an imminent risk to human health or safety. When voluntary compliance cannot be achieved, a license may be suspended or revoked, and monetary penalties may be assessed for violations by an owner or lessee on a graduated scale. Vacation rental services are also regulated by the ordinance, such as Airbnb and VRBO, by requiring that they remove a short-term rental listing with 7 days' notice when a short-term rental license has been suspended or revoked, or when an owner has been issued a notice of violation for not possessing a valid short-term rental license, or when the use of the lodging unit is otherwise prohibited. Before proceeding, we wanted to make the board aware today that the ordinance was published, and the one in your packet had a cross-referencing error. Excuse me. And you should have received today a corrected version from the county attorney's office. On page 4 of the ordinance, or page 40 of your packet, the first line of the ordinance reads, Section VE, and that the renter information interior signage required by sections VN and VO will be posted and placed at a conspicuous location. Continuing on, and what it should have read is Section VE, and that the renter information interior signage and renter written instructions required by sections VM and VN will be posted and placed. Continuing on. The board has the authority pursuant to Section 3015-401, Paragraph 1S of the Colorado Revised Statutes to enact ordinances to license and regulate short-term rentals. The process for adopting an ordinance is outlined in Section 3015-406 of the Revised Statutes. A proposed ordinance is introduced and first read at a board business meeting. A second reading of the ordinance will be conducted at a public hearing, and notice of that second reading will be published in the Douglas County News Press at least 10 days prior to the hearing date. If the ordinance is approved, a notice of its approval will be published in the news press. The ordinance may take effect immediately upon its adoption. Over the past 2 years, staff met with the board on multiple occasions to discuss options for allowing for and regulating short-term rentals. And also multiple live town halls were held with the board and the public to discuss options on how to move forward with this goal. The ordinance was on referral from January 24th, 2023 to February 15th, 2023. On April 24th, a work session was held with the board to discuss public comments and edits to the proposed ordinance. Additional edits were made to the draft ordinance based on board comments, suggestions of the county attorney's office, and the passing of House Bill 23-1287. The ordinance was introduced and first read on June 13th at the business meeting. And finally, here we are today at the second reading. Should the board approve the ordinance today, pursuant to the ordinance, the short-term rental license application review and licensing fees are to be set by a resolution of the board. The ordinance states that the fees shall be used to cover the costs associated with reviewing a license application, developing and implementing the short-term rental license program, and enforcement of the ordinance. Staff has evaluated the anticipated effort that will be necessary to develop the short-term rental license program, to review applications, and to enforce the ordinance in preparation of the proposed fees, which are as follows. An application review fee for the first year is set at $500. Application review fee for subsequent years is set at $270, and then the actual licensing fee at $130 per year. In staff's assessment, the ordinance may be approved and notice of its approval may be published in the Douglas County News Press by title only. And if the ordinance is approved, the resolution to set fees may also be approved. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Michael. Any questions or comments for staff?
I have no questions, thank you.
No questions.
And I have none either. With that, we'll open it up for any citizen comment. Is there any citizen comment either in person or online with regard to this item, these two items, both 3A and 3B? Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Commissioners. My name is William Capriva. I am from Larkspur, and just have a handful of comments about short-term rentals. So first, thank you for keeping us informed as we move forward with potentially accepting short-term rentals, and as we look at a way to, I guess, regulate them into using them here in Douglas County. Have a few comments. Basically, Douglas County already has regulations via covenants and HOAs for people to shelter their purely residential lifestyles from those who choose to utilize what they have to generate wealth and a higher standard of living, which would be some creative income strategies such as short-term rentals. We already have noise ordinances, parking ordinances, and other community regulations to accommodate neighbors' concerns about quality of life in their neighborhoods. I know that was a concern in the past in many of the town hall meetings. Short-term rentals are not as detrimental to the quality of life to those around them as many people think. Oftentimes these short-term rentals have to be in pristine condition, often better than regular residential properties in order to be successful units. So oftentimes they're better maintained than a regular residentially used property, and are definitely better maintained than many long-term rentals, which are allowed everywhere. So this already preserves the quality of life and the quality of the property, and increases the value of the properties of those around them. Those of us in favor of a less regulated short-term rental environment, I simply wasn't aware of this conversation soon enough, so I understand these comments are coming rather late to the game, but I felt I at least needed my opinion to be heard. Additionally, I'm concerned about the principle simply of private property rights and what people can do with their property to earn a living with what they have, even just additional income by operating a business from our own homes. Undue regulations may allow a path forward for people to do that. However, the time and money commitment often makes that initial investment rather large for businesses, and I understand that this is an initial wave of regulation, but I can see it getting more regulatory, more onerous. So people already have options to sanction themselves from such businesses by, again, living in HOAs or covenant. So I would request that you don't regulate these businesses out of existence for those of us that choose to pursue the freedom of using our own property as we see fit to increase our quality of life. Additionally, especially people with acreage, this is one way for us to help us to afford to preserve our land on our own dime and pursue the Douglas County's mission of keeping places open, free to use, and especially in private hands. So this basically concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Capriva. Appreciate you being with us today.
Yep.
Additional citizen comment? Yes, ma'am.
Hi. My name is Jean Hilton, and I'm here today as a board member of the Happy Canyon Homeowners Association. I implore this board to act upon your mission statement that is on the Douglas County website, and I quote, "The decisions we make have to pass one simple test: will it make Douglas County a better place? The answer must always be a resounding yes." That's end of quote. I feel, and the Homeowners Association feels, that short-term rentals will not make Douglas County a better place in terms of crime and affordable housing. Here's just one of many studies that show that a proliferation of Airbnbs or similar STRs in a neighborhood contributes to higher rates of crime in that area. From a study by the National Institute of Health, there are, and I quote, 2 potential mechanisms by which short-term rentals can lead to increased crime in a neighborhood. By bringing tourists who then perpetrate crime and disorder, either by committing crimes or being victims due to their perceived wealth, or by creating transients that undermines local social dynamics that might in turn mitigate or prevent crime, end of quote. By local social dynamics, those are, and I quote again, neighborhoods whose residents know and trust each other and share common values are more able to establish and enforce social norms. In turn, they tend to have lower levels of crime, end quote. As for the impact on affordable housing, I quote from a study by the Municipal Research and Services Center, quote, one major item that has recently been facing increasing local government scrutiny is the impact that STRs have on the supply of affordable housing. The worry is not about a homeowner renting out a room or two to help with monthly mortgage payments. Instead, there is a concern that investors will purchase existing residential units and rent them out on a short-term basis to out-of-town visitors, thereby taking those units out of the long-term rental housing market, end quote. In 2021, nearly 25% of the housing in Douglas County was rental. STRs threaten current renters' security in their homes because they can be evicted, and this has happened in other places. And then the landlord turns the property into an STR. Absentee landlords use STRs as an income source without regard to existing community. Considering the many recent studies showing the negative impact of STRs, and when 75% of respondents were against short-term rentals, how can you, in good conscience, vote in favor of this ordinance without making a few adjustments? Those might be to deny licenses when it's a non-resident owner. I have some websites if you want those, but thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate your comments.
Okay.
Additional citizen comment?
Good afternoon, Board. My name is David Carter. I'm from Larkspur, grew up in Castle Rock area, and I sit on the Colorado Agriculture Leadership Foundation Board. And the one thing that I really appreciate about Douglas County and what you guys have done is conserving the agricultural aspect of Douglas County through land conservations, through all the open space. Something that is a different take on short-term rentals. I have some family friends of mine, and they're really creative with how they promote agriculture experience, and it's through short-term rentals. So there's an educational aspect to having short-term rentals as a property owner in Douglas County, and it's by promoting agriculture experience and educating people where their food comes from and what Colorado has to offer for beef. And in fact, Colorado is the largest export in Colorado is beef. And I think that Douglas County has done a really good job conserving that. And a creative way that people have used short-term rentals is by promoting agricultural education. So I would promote the ordinance, but I would also be careful with how far the government can reach into property owners, and would advise careful attention to what do you mean by regulations, and how do homeowners and how do property owners comply to get these licenses, and where are the boundaries? I think the biggest concern that I have, and I want to have short-term rentals as a future resident in Douglas County, and I want to do agricultural experiences through that. The one concern I have is how far is the government going to reach into the pot, and how far in my life are they going to reach because I believe that we do have a freedom to use our property the way that God created it and the way that we see fit. I think Douglas County speaks largely into that agricultural aspect. And as a future homeowner here, I do want to preserve that and use short-term rentals towards that. So that's my only concern is how do homeowners be compliant, and is there a defined boundary list to that? That concludes all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter, and thank you for your leadership role. I like that term, future homeowner. We hope you make that a reality. Additional citizen comment. Is there any citizen comment online, Troy?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I do have Danny. It looks like he's representing Airbnb. Danny, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, it's a little quiet.
I'm sorry, I disconnected for a second there. I just wanted to thank you all for taking the time to meet with my colleague last week, and I know your staff's put a lot of time into this. I just want to make it clear that we are not blanketly against regulations. We want there to be a system in which you can track short-term rentals and make sure people are compliant, and we want to just make sure that that system is as easy to navigate for our hosts who operate in good faith as possible. So thank you for your time, and I am a resource should you want to continue these conversations in the future.
Great, thank you so much.
Did he give his name?
Oh, I think we heard it from Troy, but if you want to state your name and where you're from for the record again, sir.
Oh yeah, it's Danny Baldacchi, and I am on the West Coast or the West policy team for Airbnb.
Okay, thank you, Danny, for being with us. Additional citizen comment.
Thank you, sir. I have no additional online comment.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I'll close citizen comment and bring it back to the board for any further discussion and or a motion.
So I have an email that I received from a citizen that I would like to provide to the county attorney as an exhibit. This is a citizen from Highlands Ranch who used to live in Estes Park, and says those staying in STRs have no interest in the residents surrounding them and can make life a living hell for neighbors. And she asks that we not approve this. So I'll be providing this. This is from a Cindy Laycraft from Highlands Ranch.
Okay, thank you. Additional comment or questions from the board?
You bet. I'd like to go ahead and talk to the residents who came before us to address us. Well, a few months ago, I was asked really point blank by one of our elected leaders here in the county, what are we trying to do here? This sounds like a solution in search of a problem. And I did have to think about it for a second, but really there's two problems. Number one, we have property owners whom would like to make use of this method of commerce to capitalize on their property. Well, what's wrong with that? This is America. This is what we do. We capitalize on our property. Except for when our property taxes go up, we tend to hope our home values go up. Capitalizing on our property is, in many ways, the foundation of our country that was really preserved by our founding fathers at the time of independence. Our second problem, though, is that we do have people, ma'am, thank you for coming and speaking on behalf of your neighbors. We do have people that are just like you. They do not want short-term rentals. Absolutely not. And then we have a very large segment of the population that do have concerns. And are they as opposed as the email that we heard shared by my colleague, ma'am, as you and your neighbors are? No, but they don't want the Wild West either. They don't want unfettered, laissez-faire form of this form of commerce. And so this ordinance seeks to address both those two problems. Number one, it allows what is not allowed right now, period. but then it does impose a degree of regulation. And I very much appreciate the concerns that we heard from our residents today about those regulations. Our plan right now, and this is more a staff policy than it's probably written into the ordinance, is that education for that property owner, that landowner who wishes to make use of a short-term rental license will be provided during the process. Everybody saw that our second item here under this topic will be the resolution where we set those fees. I know for a fact there's a time in my life where I would look at a $500 licensing fee, and boy, that would be a whole lot, okay? So I don't want anybody to have the impression that I don't understand that burden that can be placed. Those fees are not meant to fill the coffers of the county, though. Those are not revenue generation. We've talked about this many times. We've been working on this for about 2 years, colleagues, if I recall the timeline right. We've had 2 town hall meetings on this subject, and over again, unlike other jurisdictions here in the state who do wish to capitalize on and fill the county and municipal coffers with short-term rental license fees, that's not our point here. Michael and everybody in the team have probably gotten sick of looking at the Excel spreadsheets that we compelled them to in order to come up with those fees so that it would just cover the costs of the county. And they would only be there to really make sure that the county isn't engaging in a black pit, a money pit, if you will, with this exercise. Secondly, the other point I want to make, my colleague brought up the comment about Estes Park. I grew up in Greeley. I know Estes Park really well. That's the place where folks from Greeley, Fort Collins go to 9 out of 10 times instead of going up and going skiing when they want to go to the mountains. That is a tourist mecca. I dated a lovely young lady in college for about a year and a half, and her family ran a motel in Estes Park. And her comments about the tourists were far less polite than that shared with the email. Folks, we're not a tourist mecca. Quite frankly, the number of advocates that we have heard to do this ordinance, to make this process into law, are a lot like the residents we heard from today. You're running agricultural properties, you want to preserve them, you want to keep them in private hands. This is a method for you to have additional income. 2, I don't know if anybody has any friends out on the Eastern Plains. I've got a friend, he's a melon farmer out near Brush. His melons are gone. He has no melon crop this year because that's what happens with agriculture. That's the life you lead. Now, for our cattle folks, this has probably been a really good year. We can get a dry year again and that'll go south really quick. So I look forward to it because this does, for those in our agricultural areas, in our rural areas, this does give them that way to capitalize on their property in a new way and to bring that extra income. But I have to say, the first email that I received for advocacy on this came from a resident here in Castle Rock. And she introduced herself. She said she and her husband have been retired for several years now. She lives here in Castle Rock. They're getting on in age, and they can no longer make use of their mobility problems have gotten in their way of making use of their property on the west end of the county in our more frontier areas up against the national forest. And they're on fixed incomes, and they'd like the ability to rent out their place on short-term rental basis in order to, make extra money, augment an already limited income as they go into their twilight years. So for anybody who thinks, as the example that was given, that we're being lobbied by out-of-state property owners looking to come in and buy up whole neighborhoods, because we did hear that. We heard that as part of, from our public in one of our town hall meetings. I don't know about my colleagues, if you've received calls like that. I've received no calls like that. But I've received over and over again calls from our neighbors, people who've lived here, people who grew up here, who own property here, and would like to be able to do this. For those with concerns about the regulations, I state again, we have no interest in turning this into a revenue line for the county. We just want to cover costs. Regulations, I don't know if anybody noticed, I am running for re-election, but that only gives me 4 more years. I can't talk about what our successors down the line do. My advice to them would be regulate as needed, enforce what we have in place to enforce, to keep peaceful neighborhoods now. And yeah, if we do need to drop the hammer against bad actors that come in with short-term rentals, let's do that. Let's make that enforcement. In the meantime, this is a start. It's a good start. It's not the end. Everything that we have, that I really hope we're adopting today, can be changed, can be refined going into the future. I look forward to that process also, because that's how good American government works. You change with the times, and you make changes as needed. I know we don't have a motion yet, Chair, but I do ask my colleagues to vote in favor of this ordinance and heartily endorse it.
Okay, thank you very much. Additional comment, discussion, questions, or a motion from the board?
I do have some information here. Last week, the entire board got an email from a resident of Highlands Ranch asking us to support this because it would have regulations that would help them stop a short-term rental in their neighborhood. And when I contacted those individuals and let them know, even if this passes, short-term rentals are not allowed in Highlands Ranch, and they are now in contact with Mr. Carey so they can stop this nuisance in their neighborhood. I thought it would be important to list all the places where, if this passes today, short-term rentals will not be allowed in Douglas County unless the planned development, that's the kind of zoning, is changed to allow short-term rentals. And there's 22 of them, so here's the list. Bell Mountain Ranch, Canyon South, also known as McCanta, Chatfield Farms, Cielo, Fox Hill, Highlands Ranch. That's about 100,000 residents there. Unless the planned development, the PD has changed, short-term rentals are not allowed in Highlands Ranch. Intravest 320, which is Wildcat Ridge, Keene Ranch, Lincoln Creek Village, Meridian, which includes Stepping Stone, the Pinery, Piney Lake Trails, the Plum Creek PD, which is the Solstice development, the Shea development up by Chatfield Reservoir, Providence Center, River Canyon, also known as Ravenna, Roxborough Park, Roxborough Village, Sierra Ridge, Sterling Ranch, Stone Creek Ranch, Stonegate, and Trails. So if this passes, I hope that our communications department is clear that when people hear this, they understand that if they live in one of these planned developments, that short-term rentals will not be allowed in their neighborhoods unless they have a zoning amendment change. Is that right, Steve or Michael? Thank you.
So thank you for that, and I appreciate the comments and conversation among my colleagues. I would agree this has been a long 2-year process and not done casually on any level. I think in many ways, as a trained attorney, I look through all the requirements and limitations that our staff and legal department have worked very hard to set forward to ensure that there's that balancing between private property rights and ensuring that our local ordinances and issues related to all of the things our citizens have brought up have been addressed. I look at, issues like including the owner or local responsible agent, making sure that there's that local agent that's involved and responsible for ensuring that the short-term rental meets all local, state, and federal standards. There's conformity to the requirement of the county's on-site wastewater treatment system. Making sure that in terms of structures, roofs, floors, walls, foundations, ceilings, making sure that all of those components, are in sound condition and good repair, smoke detectors. I mean, we heard so much about fire issues, wastewater issues, noise, sound. There's restrictions and regulations that allow for flexibility so that, as a board, we are honoring private property rights. We're not, I don't think, being onerous on the fees, but we're also ensuring that all of those neighborhood concerns and citizen concerns are being addressed, including trash handling, occupancy, parking, camping, fire grills and fireworks. I think staff has really done a phenomenal job of integrating all of those meetings and citizen comments into a rubric that I think really does that balancing very well. So I commend our staff and appreciate the work of my colleagues in bringing this forward today. So I'm very pleased that it does meet the needs of our community and is providing that private property right to use your property as you see fit without impairing neighborhoods. I also don't like to see perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think, George, you stated it well, that this is a good start, and there may be more to come in the future, but for now, it's nice to get this moving and off the ground if this is approved today.
Well, with all those great comments by the board, I guess I have confidence to introduce a motion to approve second and final reading of an ordinance regulating short-term rentals, project file DR 2023-001.
Commissioners, can I make one quick statement?
Sure.
Can you make the motion to the amended ordinance, because there was a change. There was that small typographical error. It was supposed to read MN, and instead it read MO. So if you state the same exact motion, but instead of an ordinance, the amended ordinance. Sorry about that, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Let me withdraw that motion and make a motion to approve second final reading of an amended ordinance regulating short-term rentals, project file DR 2023-001.
Thank you.
And as I second this, I'll thank staff for all the work they did on this. And just a reminder that at the two town halls we had, the majority of the people who answered the polls were opposed to short-term rentals.
So there's a first and second on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposed, no.
And that passes 2-1. Is there an additional motion?
I have a motion to approve a resolution setting fees related to licensing of short-term rentals, project file DR 2023-001. Does that need to be amended, or is that okay?
It does not need to be amended.
Thank you.
Second.
So there's a first and second on the floor. Any further discussion with regard to this motion?
I'll just add that I will be in favor of this, because if we're doing this, I think we need to make sure that we are covering the costs of staff to go through the process to support this.
Okay, so we have a first and second on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries 3-0. And with that, so we have concluded all of our items on today's agenda. The next land use meeting and public hearing will be held on Tuesday, July 25th, 2023 at 2:30 p.m. We are adjourned.